Welcome back to the show, everyone. I'm so happy that I have my attorney colleague, Russell D. Knight, back with us today. He's an international expert. He has 20 years of experience in family law, especially divorces, custody, and everything related to family and kids. He has a lot of experience with international clients, especially Europe and the United States, but also all around the world in Latin America. Thank you so much, Russell, for being back on the show. I'm always very happy to talk to you.
Thank you. Always nice to talk with you too.
Great. So we wanted to dive into today's topics, right, a little bit deeper. We were thinking about covering the international aspects, so challenges of international divorce. What happens if, for example, the client and the counterpart, right, the other party, they are from different continents. They live in different continents. They have minor children, and both want to get divorced. It's just not a consensual divorce. It's contested, right? So we have a lot of problems on both sides. How would you figure out where your client, who comes to you, who wants to be represented by your firm, who wants to get a divorce, where would you file for divorce, and where are you not able to get a divorce?
Well, if your client lives in the United States, your client can file for divorce here in the United States, and there's subject matter jurisdiction. That means that the court is able to make decisions about the marriage itself, even if the other person's on the other side of the world. So you definitely can get divorced here in the United States, but usually if it's contested, you don't want to just get the divorce. You also want to divide assets, figure out support, and arrange for custody of kids. So you're going to look at both whatever state you are in the United States, what their policies are towards that, and you're going to look at the country where the other parent is to see if maybe that country's policies are more friendly to your client. But there's like a big caveat to that. So let's say you're representing a man, and the spouse lives in Jordan, let's say. And my understanding is that the family law system is very, very friendly to men in Jordan. So you might say, well, just go over there and file your divorce there and see what happens. And then the property, let's say, is back in the United States. Well, if you take a Jordanian divorce decree and you come to the United States and you say, Judge, Uncle Sam, enforce this decree, the other side is going to say that's not worth the paper it's printed on because we do not have comity with Jordan.
Mhm.
And so the concept of comity is that some countries, the United States, will enforce their court orders, because the system is more or less the same as the United States system. And I'm going to go through some countries that you'd probably be surprised with the same. Obviously, Canada, we have comity with. It's the same language, same everything. England, we have comity with. France, we have comity with. Most of the EU, we do. And then a place like Israel, we have comity with. A place like Thailand, I know we have comity with because they largely base their system on the British and the American system. But then you'll have a country where things are kind of wonky. Like maybe not wonky, but they just have different values. And the best example is in countries that observe the Muslim faith, there is it's prescribed religiously how you can get a divorce. You can say talaq 3 times to somebody and you're divorced. And in America, we do not acknowledge that. We say that is something that is not fit into the due process system that we have in the United States. So my point is this, is that your client may come in and say, oh, I'll get a judge from Cambodia or somebody was going to award me everything. But to enforce that, if there's the children or the property or your sources of income are here in the United States, it will only be enforced if we have comity. And there's no guarantee for that because there's not a real test. The countries I listed off have been approved for comity, so you may have success with the judge on that. But more or less, the American system is a little chauvinistic, I guess, and probably would even say, like, what is this Canadian order? Where even is Saskatchewan? That's what I would think you need to account for.
Yeah, so there's a good rule of thumb, right? When you think about like where to get divorced, the best interest of the client is really what matters. Like where is it most favorable for you, right? What happens to the kids? Because if both parents live in different countries or want to move to different countries, what happens to the kids? How is the judge or the court, the family court, deciding where the kids are, which parents they are staying with? It's not about visitation rights. We covered that last time, right?
Mhm.
Where we have to say, well, they have to still visit the other parent, but it's mostly about where do the kids reside for the majority of the time.
Yeah. Well, those decisions are made by a court that decides it has jurisdiction over the children. And then every different country has different policies about determining where jurisdiction is. Here in the United States, mostly they determine jurisdiction at the state level because the courts handle it as where the child lived for the last 6 months. Now, then we compare it to other states. But when you're talking about other countries, it gets really sticky. So you might have a United States court who says, well, I definitely have jurisdiction over this child, even though the child went to France, 5 months ago. But then the question is, will that court, let's say in Florida, will that court order be honored in France to say return the child to the United States? Well, we come back to something beyond the concept of comity, which is that many countries have a contract between them, the treaty, and it's specifically called the Hague Treaty, and it's the Hague Convention. And the Hague Convention members say, listen, they have a whole process that says, if you have a legit jurisdiction over a child, we will honor the orders from your country in our country. Now, that's all well and good, and countries do enforce this. My experience is the European Union is very good about honoring the Hague Convention. Other countries are like, that's a great piece of paper you have there, and I guess we signed this convention treaty 60 years ago, but we're busy right now. And so the State Department releases a document that says what countries are both in the Hague Convention and what countries actually observe it reliably. And it's not a one-to-one by any means.
Exactly. That's a great side note right there about the Hague Convention. We just had a client, right? This is a German citizen. She's married to an Egyptian, and they are, for the last 10 years, they've been living in Dubai. And we were just doing research, right, on that before we took on the case. We were just doing a lot of research and said, well, the Dubai is 100%, like from our feelings, right, from our experience, we never had someone living in Dubai and had to enforce that. But this time, the family lives in Dubai, right? And when you think about it, well, Dubai has to be part of the Hague Convention, right? It has to be a member state because it's supposedly a first world country, a first world region where like a lot of expats, a lot of Americans, Europeans, reside and move there permanently, right? With their families, and they have all these, benefits and all these, advantages, right? You might think of that they live in a first world country standard, but you're smiling, and maybe you want to add some comments to that hype, why people want to go live in Dubai. I know, the taxes and all these reasons, but you would think about it. We did only a research. It took us one click to find out that Dubai and the United Emirates, they're not part. No emirate is part of the Hague Convention. So that means if you have a child that has, is bilingual, right? And one parent is from Egypt, the other one is from European Union or from Europe somewhere. They split, they argue and fight about the children. You better plan ahead how you can have custody for the kid, right? Physical custody. Because if one parent is taking the child, for example, the husband, to Egypt, that's pretty much it. You have to go and find a local court in Egypt and try to get your child back. But good luck with that, right? If you're from America or from Europe, right? Because they will probably not really care about your case as much as the local parent, right? Which is a citizen of that country. So that was very surprising to us that Dubai, supposedly a very modern place, is not even a member state of the International Hague Convention, which almost a lot of countries are, like Bulgaria, Romania, every Eastern European country is even part of that, right? So that was surprising. Maybe you have also a couple of ideas or comments about that, and if you enforced, if you have to enforce a case regarding Dubai or other countries in that region.
Yeah, well, the problem is the more frequent issue is that people want a vacation to see their grandparents or whomever.
Yes.
And a great example is India. There's 1.5 billion people there, and they have a lot of relatives all over the world. But sometimes you want to go have the child go see grandma and grandpa in India, and the other one parent says, we don't believe that they'll come back because there's no enforcement mechanism because they're not a signatory to the Hague Convention.
Mhm.
Well, that sounds on paper like a fantastic reason to keep the child from going to India. But in reality, the, the judge determines if, in fact, the parent is a flight risk. And those questions are, have you ever been to India before? Did you come back when you went? Did you ever go again? Did you ever take the child? Did you come back? And the judge will say, yeah, it may be true that we could not get the child back if they went and stayed, but I believe they're coming back. They have a job here, they have relatives here, they have friends here, their life's here, they're committed to their child's best interest, and their child's in school here. It's ridiculous to assume that they're going to go to India and then stay in India. And so
Yes.
that's another issue. That's a sort of a Hague Convention issue where it seems like an issue, but it really isn't one about visits. Now, it's a different story if the parent actually goes to India or another non-Hague Convention country and then
Yes.
they say, well, I'm not coming back. Well, you could go to the Supreme Court of the United States and get an order that that child has to come back. And
Mhm.
you could walk that order into the Supreme Court of India. And the Supreme Court of India would say, this means nothing. We have no convention that requires us to be bound by this order.
Yes.
This is like a ticket to a baseball game.
Yes.
It might be, the game might be tomorrow, it might be in Chicago, but we're here in India. So it's useless to us.
Yes. So the only solution that I hear from your comments is if you're the country where you're currently living in is not part of the Hague Convention, the only chance you have is that you get a local attorney in that country where the children are currently residing and try to, get a beneficial court order for you, right? For the
Yeah.
mother or for the dad. What would you tell or recommend someone who has an international marriage or is married to someone from a completely different culture, which happens, all the time in
Mhm.
these days, right? And a separation can happen anytime too, right? It's not up to you if you want to stay married or not. It's like both have to work together, right?
Yeah.
So what would you recommend to someone that is living with in that scenario to plan ahead, right? Should you just never move to a country where you don't know the law, where you don't feel comfortable in, getting separated or divorced, or how would you prepare someone like a friend or a family member in that case?
I would recommend that they have a secret bag full of cash and passports. And so if things start looking shaky, that they leave that country immediately with the child. That's my recommendation. Me knowing nothing about the laws of that country or whether I'm recommending something that's legal or not, I think that that's what my gut instinct would be to be able to go to a jurisdiction where the child could actually be adjudicated properly. Otherwise, it's just very scary, I
Yeah.
think.
But your client would risk also to get a criminal report, right? A child kidnapping or child abduction. And well, if you never intend to return to that country, there will probably be no repercussions, right?
I don't know. That's the problem. I guess I would have to really give the advice properly and not just my gut reaction. I would have to consult with an attorney in that country to know what the real options are. And then that's the problem is that a lot of these countries that aren't in Hague conventions, I mean, there are plenty of attorneys in India, but in Afghanistan, who would you even call? I don't
Yes.
know.
Yes. So it's super tricky, right? And everyone who lives with someone from another country and they decide to move, right? Some people are just moving from continent to continent. You're always at risk, right? You're always at risk, even in the United States. When I mean, it's very comparable between the states, but they are still different, right? The court system is still different in the different 50 states. But
Yeah,
you have at least, you have a feeling of safety and security because they're not gonna, the court is not gonna rule a surprising way, right? It's gonna say, okay, where's the child's well-being met? Where's the child's, where the child's safety points, right? Is it the father, is it the mother? Are they both able to take care of the child? They will take a look into interests of the children, and they will never make a surprisingly, like a completely unfair court judgment, right, regarding both parents. So there's always, you have always a fair trial. That's what I wanted to say also, right? There's not like culturally based, bad for the mother or bad for the father, right, regarding the country where you live in, or religiously fundamentally based, so that you cannot really, even if you're the mom and you care for those kids, the father still gets custody, legal custody. For example, in Dubai, right? If you get a divorce, it's so shocking to me, right? If you get divorced in Dubai, which seems like a very, it seems modern for most people who live there, right? From first world countries, but they think, well, if they get divorced, everything's going to be like split, but it's not the case. Even if the mom was the only one raising the kids and the father was not even present or didn't live with them, the father still gets legal custody for the minor kids. And there's just nothing, like an attorney colleague told me, there's just nothing you can do, even if the father was not around. So the mother is pretty much like it's unheard of, right? So what are you going to do in those situations? You have to live with it, or you have to plan ahead and say, well, we're not going to go there together with minor children, or you, as you said, you have a plan, an exit plan at some point, right? But then, of course, you have to, it's also not the best advice, right? To just go up and leave with minor kids, because they of course
Who
ask.
knows? Yeah, you're right. It might be a kidnapping charge, and then Interpol would get involved. This is really outside my expertise, which is really, family law in Illinois and Florida.
Yes, of course. But it's just very tricky when you have to advise people, because you cannot advise them to take anything that could be slightly, like not legal. Of course, you would never advise them, right? But on the other side, it's like, what would you advise from a human perspective if it was your situation, right? What would you recommend to clients that are saying, well, I need a representation in Florida and Illinois, right? I have a family law case with minor kids. How can I get a hold of him, right, of Attorney Russell? How can I, contact his firm? I need a legal representation. I need someone with a lot of experience.
Well, they can look at me up on my website, RDK Legal. They can call me on my cell phone, not my cell phone, but my office phone, 773-334-6311. And I will happily talk to them about what their options are in Illinois or in Florida.
Thank you so much. That was a great episode, and talk to you soon, and have a great day. Thank you so much.
No problem.